Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. We've got a lot to cover in today's episode, so let's get right to it. Unfortunately, I was a little under the weather last week, and there are a couple stories I thought were interesting but didn't get a chance to talk about. So I wanted to share those with you now. Let's go back to Tuesday last week when Fox's Jamie Little told fans she had a little time on her hands flying out to LA and was willing to answer some questions. During that Q&A on X, one fan asked what percentage of truck and ARCA broadcast will be in person versus remote from the studio. As many of you know, remote broadcasting has been a topic I have addressed multiple times on the channel because I think it's bad for the broadcast. Fans tend to agree. So unsurprisingly, fans weren't happy with Little's response when she said this, quote, "Those details are all being worked out," she said. "Remote production is here to stay and only going to grow. That's the case for multiple sports and network cable channels," end quote. Naturally, fans didn't sugarcoat what they thought of increasing remote broadcast in the future. The product suffers when it's a remote broadcast, but I'm glad the multi-billion-dollar broadcast companies can save a few bucks, wrote one fan. "Remote is garbage. You guys should be screaming this from the rooftops," another fan replied. "Not only is it clunky, but it makes the announcers look like they aren't paying attention," end quote. Little said remote broadcasts are only going to grow in the future, so I'm certainly going to watch this season and see if it's anyone besides Fox doing it, because as far as I can remember, that hasn't been the case for NBC in the past. We'll just have to see what happens in 2025. Skipping forward to Thursday, and I was listening to SiriusXM NASCAR Radio and heard a really interesting interview with Kyle Larson that covered a variety of topics and included a couple of eye-popping remarks, including this one about the driving style of Corey Day, who signed a deal with HMS last week.
Corey he's definitely, in my opinion, of guys who haven't made it to, the 3 series in NASCAR yet at this point, he's definitely the best prospect out there. So yeah, I definitely endorsed him for sure, because I've gotten the chance to race with him and firsthand see how good he is. And he's probably the only one that I feel like I've raced with that's looks like me almost out there, same sort of driving style and all that, and very versatile and can hop into anything and figure it out.
That's incredibly high praise for Day. But that was the first of several comments that got my attention. Another was talking about the upcoming exhibition race at Bowman-Gray. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to win races with huge crowds, and I've also won races with very small crowds. And the ones with the big crowds, you definitely get into it more. So, again, yeah, I look forward to, Bowman-Gray, and I hope the same crowd that shows up for a modified race is there for us too, and hang over the wall, flipping us off, and being rowdy.
I don't know about you, but I certainly didn't have Kyle Larson hoping to see fans flipping the bird during a race on my 2025 bingo card. And finally, I enjoyed Larson's answer when Alan Cavana asked what he could improve on.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we haven't won a championship in a few years, so there's still definitely room to improve on yourself and on the team and car. And then, for me personally, yeah, I mean, you look at personal statistics at the end of the year and I feel like I still crash about the most. So that's probably the one area that I feel like I've tried to get better at, even though it doesn't seem like it. But, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I kind of look at for this coming year is like, all right, how do I maintain who I am without crashing as much? So it's a constant battle with myself, but, I feel like if I can figure that out, I can be even, more successful.
If Larson can reduce the mistakes he makes, always trying to push the limits, 2025 should be a really good year for the number 5 team. Moving on to Friday, and living in Austin, we just missed out on getting some frozen precipitation from last week's winter storm. But our neighbors to the north at Texas Motor Speedway had a nice amount of snow, as did other tracks around the nation. Just hope it's not snowing at Bowman-Gray in a few weeks. On Friday, NASCAR announced multiple rule changes for the upcoming season. I want to touch on some of the bigger items, starting with the open exemption provisional, which guarantees a starting position for world-class drivers who enter a NASCAR Cup Series race, or as I'm going to call it, the Helio Castroneves rule, because Trackhouse announced later on Friday that they would use the exemption if necessary for him. That means there could be up to 41 cars in the field at Daytona. Another big rule change is to the damaged vehicle policy. In 2025, vehicles placed on the DVP may drive to the garage or be towed to the garage and will not be out of the race. The 7-minute clock remains active for vehicles making repairs on pit road. When the clock expires, the vehicle must go to the garage to continue work, but there is no clock for repairs made in the garage. However, if a car leaves its pit box and the clock expires prior to the car hitting the pit out yellow line, a penalty will be issued. And the biggest thing of note in the rule change, vehicles unable to drive to pit road, whether because of damage or flat tires, will be towed to the garage. So we won't have any more confusion with some cars being towed to pit road versus the garage like we did at Talladega. NASCAR also made a change to the playoff waivers and what I view as the Kyle Larson rule after last year's run at the double. If a playoff waiver is granted for missing a race, the driver will forfeit all current and future playoff points earned prior to the playoffs and will start the playoffs with a maximum of 2,000 points. Exceptions to the forfeit of playoff points include age restrictions, medical reasons like driver medical, birth of a child, and family emergency. And the last rule change I want to talk about resulted from the Martinsville shenanigans last season and is based around the 100% rule. According to NASCAR and its performance obligation, the verbiage around the 100% rule is replaced with a focus on, quote, manipulating the outcome of an event championship. Rules violations by an OEM may result in a loss of manufacturer's points and/or loss of wind tunnel hours. I know there were a lot of you that wanted something changed about the playoffs, but it doesn't look like that's happening this time around. I will say I like the DVP change, but I'm not really a fan of the open exemption provisional. Now I get why NASCAR and Trackhouse want to guarantee Castroneves can make the Great American Race, but that just takes away one possible dramatic storyline of him not making it through qualifying. Moving on to Sunday and a couple of other news items. The first one is from a post I saw on X from Xfinity Series driver Garrett Smithley, giving kudos to his father and those fighting the wildfires in California. And it included a video that showed just how badass his father is flying his tanker and dropping fire retardant elements around the LA area. Clearly, the Smithley family has a need for speed and living on the edge. Thank you to Mr. Smithley and all of those first responders who are putting their lives on the line every day out there battling these horrible fires. And finally, our last story of the day is kind of circling back to our first story with Fox. Yesterday, during the NFC wildcard game, the network aired an IndyCar commercial that focused on Joseph Newgarden. It was flashy and appealing to watch. The video was getting a lot of buzz on social media before it ever aired. NASCAR fans were wondering whether or not NASCAR would get similar treatment. Truck Series driver Roger Carruth noted how he hadn't seen any NASCAR ads and it was, quote, a little frustrating to say the least, end quote. Well, that was before Fox ran an ad during the same football game. There was a Daytona 500 ad that looked like this. While I was happy to see NASCAR being promoted, it did make me wonder why they included old footage of Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon in the race. Like we don't have anything more recent than those two guys from Daytona? And it only lasted 15 seconds compared to the IndyCar ad, which was 45 seconds. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode, and I want to get your thoughts about it. First, let me know what you think of Jamie Little's comments on the increasing number of remote broadcasts in the future. Second, for you Kyle Larson fans, what did you think of his comments on the various topics, including flipping the bird at Bowman-Gray? And what are your thoughts on the rule changes for 2025? Like them or no? And finally, if you saw yesterday's Daytona 500 ad during the football game, what did you think about it? Thanks again for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.